Welcome to the newest edition of the Outdated Wrestling Hour. Our guest is Beau James. I remember him. He sang those songs about country western stars. And yeah, Beau James, you know. Jinga janga jinga jinga.
Damn you!
What? Oh, that was Sonny James from the 1960s. He had big hair. I mean, it looked like a chocolate cake. He had so much hair. Used to wear the spurs and the country outfits. No, this is Beau James, the famous wrestler, impresario, promoter, you name it, he's done it. And he's on the Outdated Wrestling Hour. All right, I definitely pulled something that time. Jeez. Hey everybody, this is Bob Smith, your old friend from PWI way back in the day, and this is the newest edition of the Outdated Wrestling Hour. As you know, we're part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network now, and I want to thank Ray Russell and everybody else for helping us get on board. Our guest is Beau James, fellow podcaster who just started a new thing, and I had a blast talking to this guy. I didn't answer this guy's messages for a while because I thought he was a new wrestler using the old name of Beau James. No, this is the original Beau James. And what a history he's had in the squared circle. So I'm going to let him tell his whole story here. It's really cool. I was on his show and had a great time. I think you're going to have so much fun listening to him on my show as well. Really like this gentleman. I'm really, really fond of him just after speaking to him for a couple of times. Glad we did it because you know what? This was a lot of fun. And I think it will translate to you out there. So, get your drink, get your snacks, get yourself ready. We're going to have our usual short commercial announcement and then right to the fun with Beau James. Don't go anywhere if you know what's good for you, man. I mean, hang out, chill, put your feet up, sit a spell. Well, it's sort of kind of been in the news lately. We want you to know all about it. Recently, the Outdated Wrestling Hour podcast with Bob Smith has joined the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. I'm really glad to be part of this team, and you can hear the podcast virtually anywhere the podcasts are offered. Such great shows like the Wrestling Memory Grenade, Regional Wrestling, is the Wrestling Stoop with Bob Rube. Gene Jackson's another great host. You can hear him on the Retro Wrestling Review, which looks back at the classic days of USWA, and the brand new show, Dangerous Conversations with Doug Gilbert, featuring, Doug Gilbert, one of the great Memphis wrestlers of all time. Also on the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, Dave Dynasty and his long-standing hit podcast, Wrestling Nostalgia, featuring an A-list bunch of professional wrestlers you never know you're going to hear speaking with Dave. And of course, a serious bent on the WWA, and I love that. There's DG's Puro Wrestling Academy. Join host Dan Giannetti as they travel back in time to discuss the history of wrestling in Japan. Through the decades, not just recently. You're going to want to check out that show. Monday Warfare, Raw vs. Nitro, looks at, the classic Monday Night Wrestling Wars. The Other Ship podcast describes itself as a pop culture podcast with a pro wrestling lean. Join a rotating group of co-hosts as they talk movies, sports, TV, food, and of course, wrestling. How can you beat that? And they got a whole mess of great special guests, too. Also on the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, you're going to want to check out The Captain's Corner, GrappleCon, TR Shocks the World, WCNN News, and a whole lot more. You'll never know what you're going to hear on the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Well, how do you find all this stuff, right? Simple. Start out by just logging on to WrestleCopia.com. Let them take you on that ride, baby. to pro wrestling old and new. I may be an old wrestling guy, but I'm adult. Because somebody by the name of Beau James contacted me and went, who? Now, I knew a Beau James when I worked for the wrestling magazines. I didn't dream in a million years it was that one, the real one. So I am really proud to have him on the show. I just did a taping of his podcast, which is called Outlawed to Independence, and I had a time of my life. We immediately hit the button and get him recorded another show. They're on my show now. Folks, here is Beau James, the king of Kingsport. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm so glad to be talking to you, Bob, as we covered on the other podcast. Bob is a great supporter to my career, not knowing that he was, because of something he helped create, the PWI 500 that I was covered in for many years, and it helped keep me booked around the country for a long time. So I'm forever grateful for that. And yes, Bob, I am an old-time wrestler now. This is my 36th year involved in the wrestling business.
So tell me about, you have a promotion, right? Just carte blanche. Tell me about everything you're doing.
I've had the promotion for 33 years. My first job in wrestling was ring crew and running errands for the Continental office under Ronnie West and Ron Fuller and Bob Polk. And then when the territories went away, I got started in the local outlaw wrestling, and then I said, there's a void here. And I created this idea that I came up with help from my parents and some other people and some local businessmen. And we started in 1991. And here we are. This February will be 34 years that we've been running this promotion. Our promotion now is for young people. A lot of talent comes from Dr. Tom Pritchard and Glenn Jacobs Wrestling School in Knoxville. We have some kids from the School of Ricky Morton School. And we produce a weekly program called Legacy, because our legacy of our promotion is we created young talent. We had a lot of guys and girls that came through here and got to do national TV. So we do weekly programming to get them camera ready. We teach them camera marks, time cues, how to work to the camera. We have agents for their matches. We ran last night. Dr. Tom and I were the agents for the matches, and my nephew was running the production. So it's the family business. We've been around a long time, and I've got a little niece and a little nephew coming right up behind us, my grandniece and grandnephew, and they're already making plans to take over when their uncle just gets to where he can't do it anymore. And I think they're going to be the best out of all of us.
That sounds great. Hey, listen, you've got a special guest here. Introduce your co-host, if you would, of your podcast.
All right. We got Jon Boucher here, and Jon and I have been friends online for many years, trading back and forth research and wrestling information that we have both uncovered and did. And Jon also hosts another podcast, Charting the Territories, with my dear friend Al Getz, who I helped break into the wrestling business 30 years ago. And we all were in Waterloo, Iowa for the National Wrestling Hall of Fame, Thez Tragos Hall of Fame. And I got to meet Jon for the first time in person.
Yep.
And me and Jon were instant friends. And Jon makes me think. He asks me questions about subjects I'm talking about. And I said, we got to do a podcast together. And there's 10 million podcasts.
Yep.
We got to do ours different. We're going to talk about independent wrestling, outlaw wrestling as it was called back then, before 1999, and that's our subject. And Jon, come to find out, is Bob's neighbor.
John, if I pass you on Union Turnpike or what?
You may. If I was probably hitchhiking.
Are you one of those Queens no car guys? Then is that what's going on?
No car.
What's happening?
No car. No.
You don't have a car.
No car.
Can you believe this, Beau? I have known so many people here in this area. I'm originally from the Catskill Mountains.
Yeah.
I'm originally from Catskill, New York, in Greene County, upstate. But I know so many people here who have never driven a car because they don't have to. They can take the subway to get here or there, or a bus, or anything they want. So you're one of those, huh, Jon?
I can drive. I just don't have a car because there's no. Parking is very, very, very expensive.
Yes, it is.
So very expensive.
Well, anyway, welcome to the show. Congratulations on your success, too, with the other podcast. Everybody knows that podcast. So I think that We got two of the real best podcasts here. So let's talk a little bit about the state of independent wrestling with you, Beau, because how hard is it in 2024 to present live pro wrestling that is definitely indie?
It's oversaturated. Like when we started years ago, there was a couple of little outlaw promotions here in this region, but we were the first ones to get the magazine coverage. Thanks to you guys, we were the first one with a local television program here. So we were able to separate ourselves from anybody else trying to do it here in the Appalachian Highlands. But now everybody's got YouTube. Everybody's got social media. Everybody's on a local level playing field. So it's a little harder to do stuff now. Promotion wise, it's easier than ever because you can make something digitally, put it on social media, buy some ads, and right there, boom, it's right in people's hands. But I still like the old posters. I still go hang window cards. I still do the promotion the old way and the new way just because I actually love being out on the streets promoting and running into wrestling fans and talking to wrestling fans. And, you know, it never fails. And luckily for me, I was on TV here so long. I'm still on the streaming service as one of the co-hosts. I wrestle every now and again. But people have watched me for so long and I take my little nieces and nephew out. And they're like, "Are we famous?" I said, "We're small town famous. Everybody knows us, right?" "I know. It's because your uncle's been on TV since he was 16 years old. That's all right." But the downside of that, I'm 50 years old. Everybody thinks I'm 80 years old because they're like, I grew up watching that guy right there. That's because we're the same age. But the thing that we offer that is different than any other promotion out there, I believe, is the relationships and the connections through the years that I have with people. If you look at the Performance Center with the WWE now, there's about 5 or 6 or 7 people working there that I was in the ring with and have known since they started. Dr. Tom, who is one of my dearest friends in the world, and, you know, he has the school and sends guys to me. We have connections. Just a few weeks ago, I had AEW office members sitting ringside with Dr. Tom, who's an NWA office guy, watching our kids wrestle. So we have a connection and a way for them to get seen. I've had several kids with NWA tryouts in the last year. I had 2 kids with WWE camps this year, and I had a kid that was just on AEW a couple of weeks ago. So we're able to help them through our connections and relationships over the years. And we try to make sure they have the fundamentals and are TV ready.
Very good. John, have you seen his promotion? Do you get a chance to look at it?
I've seen some on YouTube. I have, yeah.
And your impressions?
I don't have a lot to compare it to because it's really the only, aside from like the other, like the NWA stuff that you mentioned, like that stuff. Like I haven't watched, there's not a lot of other stuff that I've seen at that level very recently. There's like one group in New York that I've seen a couple times. I like Beau's stuff better than that. I don't know if that's I'm biased. I'm able to watch it without going in cold. I'm able to enjoy it. I don't need to be brought up on anything. I can just go in cold and watch it. So it's something you can just go on YouTube and watch without knowing the history of anything. And it's enjoyable to be consumed in that manner for me, which is very important.
We don't have a WWE budget for a WWE production. So we are nuts and bolts, man. We are as close to the old time Memphis wrestling or continental southeastern wrestling. You'll see modern matches because it's young kids, but long-term booking. The main event for last year, the main event for our Thanksgiving event, we started to build to that in November of the year before. So one full year we built to that. And we've got some stuff now that's building and been building since the beginning of that November run. By the time it pays off, it's 3 years. Unless these kids get signed and I lose them, and then I'm like, oh God. But
Yeah.
if they were to get signed and I did lose them, I'd be the happiest person in the world, because that's my goal now. My goal now is to give back to the wrestling business that I love so much and give them an education and give them an opportunity. When the call came, when they got invited to go to the camp, I was so happy. And Dr. Tom was the one that got the call about him going. And he called me and he said, "You want me to?" I said, no. I'm telling them, me, because I'm the happiest sumbitch in the world right now. I said, I'm just so happy. And I was so happy to call both of them and say, hey, whatever you got on this day, I don't care what it is, you mark it off because you're invited to something very special. It's opened up a way of them. They've been in contact back and forth with the WWE office a few times since then. So that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping to help get somebody. I lived all my dreams. I grew up a Southern NWA fan. I figured my life would be Knoxville wrestling, Continental Southeastern to Memphis and back and forth. I didn't have a clue when they went out of business. Oh God, what am I going to do? Well, when Knoxville did, I had my own promotion, but I got to wrestle in the Mid-South Coliseum. I've produced TV in the ballroom at the Civic Coliseum in Knoxville, Tennessee. I've wrestled in the Louisville Gardens, the Evansville, the Nashville Fairgrounds. I've been inside the Boutwell Auditorium. I've got to wrestle all my heroes. Now, these kids, they talk different than we do, but they have the same passion, the same drive, and I want them to get to live their dreams.
There you go. That sounds great. Now, I have a question for both of you guys.
Yeah.
I used to love when I was with PWI. I was the first one in my car. I'd do it on my own dime. I'd go to all the indie shows in my area because I just liked indie shows. I enjoyed them. A lot of them you'd see like somebody between contracts who would be in the main event, and then you'd see a bunch of young kids coming up. And part of the fun of that for me was giving them some publicity. If I saw a kid I thought had talent, I'd write about him. And it was fun. Here's my question. I look on Facebook and I look at YouTube and I see independent wrestling where not only do a lot of the young kids take unnecessary risks, in my view, like jumping off of basketball hoops into rings and blah, 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 blah. There's even organizations with names like Bloody Entails Wrestling and stuff like that.
Right.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
My question is this. First of all, I don't think you can make the major leagues using a plunger on somebody or something. It's not wrestling. Secondly, I'm afraid somebody's going to get hurt out there. I mean, really hurt, like really hurt.
Yeah.
And what are your opinions on this? Because I support independent wrestling, but by the same token, I see stuff that's, well, in my mind, irresponsible.
That it's irresponsible. It's irresponsible of the people running the promotion. It's irresponsible of the veterans in the dress. Somebody should say, hey, don't do that. And this is why. Somebody should say, hey, here's a perfect example. I told years ago, I'm a young kid, I'm full of pee and vinegar and everything else, and I'm just trying to make it, and I'm living that life, and I'm out of my mind, and I'm working with Handsome Jimmy of all people, the guy that's never hurt nobody. He's never, he's the easiest person in the world to work with and to make money with. And I said, hey, look, I want to do this little deal tonight. We're in some spot show. I talked him into hip tossing me into the bleachers. I don't know why I thought this. I don't, and he goes, oh, no, but I wanted to take this bump. I said, well, how about this then? And it was a good house and everything. I'm just trying to give the people their money's worth. So somehow we end up doing something. It wasn't the hip toss, but something. And I took a bump down a couple of bleachers. And the next day I get up and I've got a bruise on my hip and I can't hardly walk. And we got 3 more towns that week. And then we got next week and the week. And Handsome says, longevity. Bill Dundee always taught me longevity. These young kids now want it now. They want instant gratification. Video games, they're the winner right then. Whatever they're doing, they want it right now. If you notice, all of them jump on the second rope and put their arms out and look at me. They want that gratification of that approval or disapproval right now. So they're willing to do whatever it takes to get that right now. But where are they going to be in 5 years? What if they're dead? That's never a thought process in their mind. Probably 10 years after the Handsome Jimmy with the bruised hip and all that, my cousin KC and I are wrestling in a little bitty town in Kentucky. And I'm sitting in the dressing room just waiting to go to the ring, waiting on our time. And KC comes back in the dressing room and he said, "Hey, cuz, we ain't wrestling." And I said, "What?" He goes, "They just killed a man out there." And I go, "What?" He goes, "They just tried to do some kind of thing into a pile driver." As I come out of the dressing room to go to look, I can hear people in the arena, in the gym, yelling, screaming. And I look, and it's some kind of deal. They had to fly the helicopter in, get the kid, take him off. I never saw him again. I'm assuming he never wrestled again. That was probably his lifelong dream, was to be a wrestler, but he ended it by decision. He ended it because somebody didn't, and if I would have heard it, I would have said, "Oh, don't do that here. Don't do that, period." They want that self-gratification, and the dressing room leaders are not in the business now. As a young man, as a teenager, I was riding with people like Jimmy Valiant, Jimmy Golden, the Mongolian Stomper, Wahoo McDaniels, Ronnie Garvin. These were the people I was learning from, and I still have great relationships with. And I listened to what they said, and they all said longevity. Last as long as you can. Make as much money as you can. Take care of your family as long as you can. And Wahoo McDaniels one time told me in the car, "Bumps are for marks." And I'll never forget, because I looked at him like, "What?" And he said, "If you have to continuously throw yourself down to get a reaction, you're not very good at what you're doing. If you can't get a reaction standing on your feet, you're not very good."
Mm-hmm.
And that's always stuck with me. And
Yeah.
it's involved. These kids now are greater athletes than any generation that's ever been out here. But I've talked to John about this. It boggles my mind, Bob. We live on a digital world with so much information at our fingertips, but guys and girls now know the least about the wrestling business as anybody ever before.
Damn Skippy, they don't understand the psychology. And on top of it, there are really irresponsible promotions that you've all seen YouTube with guys hitting each other head with stacks of fluorescent light tubes, and because there's no athletic commission to stop all this stuff, and throwing each other off of on the tables and missing, and it's a disaster waiting to happen. And not only that, they're not even the finishes. Let's get into the real psychology. They're not even the finishes. I saw a women's match where one woman threw another woman off a balcony, and it looked like she hit her head on the apron as she went to the floor. And that wasn't even the finish. I'm like, what in the world are they doing to each other? I rest my case, man. It's just, and here's the stupid part about it. AEW is taking their cues off all this stuff.
Yeah.
They just had a match that was exactly like I'm describing to you right now.
Yeah.
All this dangerous stuff, one move after another, one what I call cheap pop after another.
Yeah.
You agree? How about it, John? What do you think?
To Beau's point, like the guys and the women today are all in amazing shape, and they have athletic ability that is off the charts, and that's great. Early this afternoon, 20 minutes before we recorded, I was on Twitter, and someone had posted a clip of Pedro Morales and Mr. Fuji from Madison Square Garden, and it was just 3 minutes of Mr. Fuji doing the thing with the donut hole. And jabbing with and yelling at Mrs. Krieger in the front row.
Right.
And he had, the first 15 rows, you're standing up out of their seats, screaming, yelling. That to me that's working. That's what working is doing that, and not having to leave his feet.
Right.
Getting the crowd, a bigger crowd like that sort of, that I think is what is missing. Granted, it's a different audience today. Granted, everyone consumes media and wrestling differently, but there has to be a way where you can you can't go back to 1972. No.
Right.
But there has to be a way to sort of implement that kind of psychology and non-physical, work into one's work. And I think that's sort of a key to this, and less crazy bumps, less gratuitous violence, because that will get numb to very quickly, as we've seen.
Yeah.
Whereas excellent crowd work like that will always work. And that, if you have someone who's good at that will always work.
I went up, me and KC used to go up and wrestled some in Pennsylvania and New Jersey and stuff years ago. And when we made our first trips up there, the local guys said, "Hey, look, that stuff you guys do, that ain't going to get over here." I said, "Oh, really?" "Yeah." I wrestled in Seattle and in Portland for some people out there several times, probably 20 years ago. Same thing. All them guys go, "Hey, that old wrestling stuff you do, it ain't going to work here." We're in some Knights of Columbus Hall there, right across from New York City, somewhere in New Jersey. I'm wrestling Cousin Luke, and I grabbed the donut hole, and there's people coming out of the crowd trying to take it out of my hand, and I have nothing. So I'm fighting that, trying to get this, and when I leave the ring, there's all kinds of Spanish people. I don't know if they were Puerto Rican or what they were. The locals said they were the Puerto Rican whatever gang or whatever. They're all trying to stick me with knives and shit. So I said, when I got back there, I said, "Hey, glad I really didn't do any of that Tennessee stuff out there, because I'd have been dead."
Unreal. Well, times changed. I don't have to agree with it. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, but my little niece and nephew, I keep going back to them because they're my world and I love them. But little Aubrey and little Waylon have made me fall in love with the wrestling business again. I don't agree with everything. I don't understand everything. I mean, there's people that my little niece and nephew like that I watch them and I'm like, I don't understand what this guy's gimmick is, or I don't understand. But they love him, or they love her. So I don't. There's a lot of stuff in modern wrestling that I do like. And I didn't watch it for a long time, and I'm happy to see that, and I'm happy to see because our business is going to live forever somehow. How, I don't know, but it's going to live forever. It came from the carnivals, and now this generation goes, "Oh, he's a carny." They say carny like it's a bad word. Look here, dude. We're all carnies. We're all trying to manipulate everybody. You're trying to make them believe you're a tough guy. Look at you. That's always my point to these young guys. Or you're trying to make them believe this. That's the point of being a carny. You're trying to make them believe something. Now, if you get worked by somebody, you're not that smart. If you get worked and you're in the wrestling business and someone else can work you and you don't see it, you're not that smart. You have nobody to blame but yourself for not getting smart to the wrestling business. But from the carnival days till infinity, this business is going to survive. And every generation, it gets a little bit wilder, a little bit crazier. And I believe it all goes back to they now know it's a show. They don't have to have any realism whatsoever to it. They don't have to have any thought process of, well, how does this make sense? How do I get there? Oh, no, he's just going to lay there on that table while I climb 80 feet up this wall in this building, and then I fall, and hopefully I didn't misjudge anything. And if I do miss you, just continue to lay there, then I'll get up and jump on you a different way.
It's like you encapsulated it right there, what I think is a major problem. But I will say this: they're printing money in WWE. That's all I know. You and I, who go back a long way, can complain about the lack of psychology.
Yeah,
and that lack of psychology is filling football stadiums 2 nights in a row.
Right.
So I don't know what to say other than, you know what? I just wish they would. I think they could tweak it without losing the flavor they have now.
Yeah.
Fans can be conditioned. If you present something a certain way, they will accept it. They've always accepted it in wrestling. Good gosh, people watch Glow. I don't know what to tell you. It's like, and that was hardly wrestling, but that was a flavor that worked for somebody. I guess it was just the girls. I could be wrong. Who knows?
I remember the first time that I saw Glow. It was a commercial for our little local Fox, but then it was an independent station that carried Continental, Memphis. It carried the smaller territories on 39 here in East Tennessee. And I just happened to catch a Glow commercial during a Memphis commercial one time, and it said, "Wrestling fans, we're not even sure what this is." And I watched it, and I was like, I'm not sure what it is either, but it's not pro wrestling. I can tell you that.
No, it certainly wasn't professional. With the exception of Tina Ferrari, who became Ivory in the WWE. You could tell from 50 yards she had something special going for her. She was a real wrestler.
Yeah.
I think she knew Eddie Guerrero and those guys, and she had gotten real training, and she was a real athlete.
Yeah.
She stood out like a sore thumb. She didn't belong there. She belonged where she eventually ended up. So,
well,
anyway, let's talk about your podcast. It's brand new, right? It's Outlaws to Independence, and tell us why you're doing it, John. How you got involved? Just give me the Kook's tour about how you guys put this thing together.
I've had growing up in the wrestling business. I mean, I got my first job at 14. I was in the dressing room at 15. And when I started, it was outlaw wrestling. We weren't even independent. We were referred to as those effing outlaws or whatever. I have seen the worst of the worst, and I've seen the best of the best, and I've seen everything in between. And I have stories on top of stories of 35, 36 years now being in the dressing room with some of these characters that most people don't have a clue about, or stories that people don't know about. One of these stories that we're going to do here coming up real soon is about a promoter, and I heard his name in the dressing room the first time when I was 15 years old, when one of the wrestlers said, "Hey, did you hear about such and such?" I'm going to give the big tease here. I'm not giving the name. He shot and killed his brother-in-law in front of the boys the other night in the dressing room. And I go, what? Then I'm thinking, this can't be real. This can't, but then the more I saw in the wrestling bit, oh my gosh, this really is real. And I have met this man, and I know the story now. So we're going to tell the story by people that were there and lived it and everything else. As we just did a long episode on Lou Thez and his outlaw promotion of trying to run in Tennessee that failed miserably. Miserably did Lou Thez fail. But that also turned into me and Jon getting involved in a story about child neglect and this and that from one of the wrestlers that worked for Lou that is just insane. Jon and I we're fascinated by Donald Van Fleet. Jon, was he the first outlaw promoter?
I don't know if he was the first. He goes way back. And he when you think of like the outlaw promoter in your head, he's sort of like the archetype of that. Like he had just a troop of people follow him around, his wife Violet Ray, and he would go, and he had the poster with the promotion name and the wrestler's name, and he would just change the date, and the venue, and he would just go, and that was his thing. And he'd go from Maine to Florida. I think he started in Iowa, I think, as like a boxing promoter. Yeah. As a boxing promoter, and just, and then just all from Maine to Florida, just driving up and down wherever, setting up shop, doing it and moving on,
And he was running Cuba when Castro overthrew the government. Donald Van Fleet had to flee Cuba because the revolution, and Jon was able to find the paperwork of where he came back into America with the people that he came back into America with. And there's stories like that out there of these outlaw guys before it became what independent wrestling is now. They're an important part of wrestling because guys like Jerry Lawler, Bobby Fulton, Billy Travis, the Moondogs, Wayne Ferris, all came from the Outlaws. They all started wrestling. So it's important that these stories of Aubrey Griffin are told, and if Dale Mann is told, and all these other promoters that were the leaders of these outlaw groups, and they're forgotten in history or just completely unknown. And I will pride myself and Jon on this and other people that help us. We do a lot of research. I mean, we spend a lot of hours, because when we tell the story of somebody on this podcast, we want it told correctly. We want their family to be able to listen to it and say, hey, you did a great job. You covered our mother, our grandmother, our father, grandfather, our uncle. And there's situations, too, dealing with outlaw wrestling. They were not always the most upstanding people in the business. So we may come across some stories that are hard to cover, but we're going to cover them. And we're going to tell people, hey, look, if this bothers you, you need to fast forward to this point in the program, but this needs to be told, because we set out to tell the story and to tell it truthfully, and sometimes you have to tell some bad stuff to tell it, but these stories need to be told.
This is the most original idea I've heard for a wrestling podcast this year. No, I'm serious. Nobody else is tackling this, folks. You're not going to hear this stuff anywhere else but that podcast. A nice job, guys. I mean, it's like with every episode I do, like, who's going to want to hear this? Why are they going to want to listen? You guys, outlaws? Too good because nobody else even thought of it. Congratulations!
And it's like
this is gonna work. I'm telling you. How many episodes have you done so far?
Well, counting yours, 3. You're in very early. Here's something else, Bob. When we do research, like when I did the one for Tennessee, Lou Thez, Quentin Charisma did a lot of research on Lou's thing. I don't know why he did it other than just fascination of Lou's promotion, but he sent me his files. And one of the things that Quentin had was the athletic commission files that survived over the years that are in the state archives. So we're seeing names of people that worked for Lou Thez, because back then you had to write on there who the promotion was you worked for, the whole deal. My cousin worked for Lou Thez. He was Lou's booker at one point. There's other people that I was in the ring with that were a part of that story. When we get to Kentucky and West Virginia outlaws and North Carolina outlaws, there will be many people in there that I personally know and have been in the ring with, because I was in that generation that bridged from being those effing outlaws to, hey, we're independent wrestling. We're the hottest thing in town. And back to my promotion, I pride myself as being one of the leaders of that, because I saw what we had could be much more than what it was. And I went and talked to buildings and TV stations and stuff that no other outlaw promoter would, because they go, why? They're not going to do it with us. And I would walk out of there with deals, because every TV station needed programming. Every building needs to be rented. Everybody else shied away because they were afraid of it. But on the very first episode of the podcast, I tell the story of one of the first buildings that I worked and how terrible it was. And it's right out of Alfred Hitchcock. I used to wrestle at the 11E auction house in Greenville, Tennessee. The baby faces, because the guy that owned the building, he would buy the show from me, and I would send the talent. He had promoted outlaw wrestling for years and years and years, so much so that he had been involved in the PAFO's ICW. He promoted Greenville for a lights out match. His name was Roy Roberts, wonderful guy, but he was not smart to the business and didn't know. Roy promotes Garvin and somebody in a lights out match. And as the match is getting ready to start, Roy comes from the concession stand, grabs the microphone and says, "Hold on a minute. I promised the people of my hometown a lights out match, and that's exactly what we're going to have." And he turns the lights out in the rec center in Greenville. It's completely dark, because he didn't understand it meant non-sanctioned lights out, anything goes. He thought it actually meant the lights in the dark. Garvin and his opponent jump up and down, roll around a little bit. Finally, the referee makes a 3 count. They ring the bell, turn the lights back on. No one saw nothing. They heard it. It must have been true. That's the kind of stories you're going to hear on this podcast, because I've been around so long and dealt with so many people, from the good to the bad to the ridiculous, that we're going to be able to entertain you and educate you. That's my purpose of every podcast: entertain and educate on every podcast.
You know, you made me laugh, but that must be the worst match ever. That's got to, and people paid to see it. Oh my God, that's.
Garvin told me it was the easiest money he ever made.
That sounds about right. So, guys, tell the people where they can find your podcast, where they can find you. John mentioned both your podcasts. Give me the cook's tour of what you guys are up to.
Outlaws to Independence, type it in. We are on most of the platforms for podcasting, but we're still growing because we're so new. We're not on Apple yet, but we're on Spotify. We're on a whole bunch of others that I didn't even know exist, and most of the major platforms. You can also follow the Outlaws to Independent Instagram, X, Outlaw Pods on X, and Facebook, Outlaw to Independence. We're always putting up research, putting up teases to what the programs are going to be about, and giving you more to the story if there is any more, which I have 2 great updates that me and John are going to have to cover on the Lou Thez one that I did, because people that listened to it, that were a part of it, reached out to me and said, "Hey, did you know this?" And I was like, "No, I did not." Mm-hmm. And so I got firsthand accounts on a couple more things. So follow us on all that stuff. You can follow me, King of Kingsport, on X, on Instagram, all that stuff. And John, tell them about not only ours, but tell them about you and Al Getz.
Oh yeah, you can follow me, JON_BOUCHER on X, at the old Twitter. Our show, Beau just gave you all that stuff. And I also do a monthly podcast with Al Getz called Charting the Territories. And you could, what we do basically on that show is we do a territory a month from a particular month. This whole year we did 1971. So we've covered 11, I think something 9 or 10 territories so far this year, all from 1971, and go through territory by territory. Follow that, chartingtheterritories.com. Follow us for Outlaws and Independence. We've got a lot of, it's once a month. So low commitment, but lots of education and entertainment there.
And lots of work.
Lots of work.
For me too, guys, because there's 2 new subscriptions I got to take out, and now how am I going to have time to listen to both? Because you both ring my bell with these things. It's the kind of stuff I want to hear. So doggone you! I'm shaking my fist at him. You can't tell, folks.
The thing, Bob would fit in perfect with the charting the territory with all the mathematical wins and losses and everything that Al does.
Oh yeah,
Bob had to do it for the ratings.
Yeah. That's right. It was I'm glad I'm not doing that anymore. It wasn't that bad. I didn't have to sit down with a calculator or anything, but the fact was I would do little hash marks, 1 win, 1 loss, 2 wins, 1 loss. And you develop a rating. Yes, I did the ratings for PWI. So I'm the one you can complain to 35 years later. Thank you very much. Write to me I'll forget it. Don't complain. Thank you so much. I had an absolute blast doing your podcast. I'm glad you took the time to do mine. Come back. Let's do a longer one next time, and we will have some more fun. How about that? I know your time is the essence. I am always strapped for time, but I'm going to make time for you guys for sure.
Bob,
thank you.
Can I say this real fast? I want to talk about. I live right in the heart of where all the flooding from the hurricane is at here in East Tennessee. I mean, within a community 20 miles from me, there's somewhere between 30 and 70 people missing. We're hard hit. So anywhere on all the social media stuff that we just shared, I am going to start updating where people can send to help if they want to donate money, or if they live locally in East Tennessee or within driving distance and want to drive supplies, because we need socks and underwear, baby formula and pet food and clothing and food and water and toiletries and female hygiene products, because there's so many people here that have lost so much. Some people have lost everything, and we don't know about a death toll yet, because there's still communities they have not gotten to because the roads are impassable. You cannot get to Western North Carolina from East Tennessee now, and vice versa. So it's going to be days, it's going to be months before we know how bad it is. We appreciate it. I appreciate if you're listening that you've reached out to ask me about me and my family, because I had a lot of people over the last few days ask me that. But I will be updating on my social media. And if you can help, God bless you. Please do, because East Tennessee, what we call the Appalachian Highlands, from Western Carolina up through to southern West Virginia, we need a lot of help right now.
Wow, that's for sure. And I, in the 2 podcasts we just put together, I want you to know this week. Of course, I don't know when this show is going to come out, but the week that we're taping this, I'm going to come out Wednesday with a new Outdated Entertainment Hour. I'm going to devote the whole thing to what's going on down south, where people can call, where people can go to a website to contribute, or any way they can get involved. It's worth it to me. I have too many friends down there, and I don't know what to do other than help spread the word. So I think if you do it and I do it and a bunch of other people do it, we will help. I know people, my neighbors from New York have already gone down there to help people in Tennessee. I'm proud of them for doing it. But you know what? This may be one of the biggest, worst things that ever happened in the United States of America. I can't think of anything else like this.
I worked the West Virginia flood of 15, and I worked the Eastern Kentucky flood relief, both places. And until you stand there and see it, you can't comprehend it. You can see it on TV, you can see it online, but until you stand there and you smell it and you see it and you witness it, you cannot understand the devastation of a flood like this. This is over. They said today on the news, the last time the Nola-Chucky River flooded to this level was 1901. What happened the night before last, as we record this, was 26 feet higher than what it had ever been measured at. There's complete communities where there's nothing left standing. Schools are closed because people now live in the schools in Washington and Greene and Cotton County, Tennessee. We need all the help. And Bob, thank you. And yeah, there's people here from everywhere that I've seen the last couple of days. I have not driven to look at the hard hit areas. One of the hardest hit areas for me is it's a 15-minute trip. I don't want to see it. I have too many great memories of playing baseball at that school that's washed out, or going to the corn maze at Fender's Farm down there. I don't want to see it devastated the way it is, but eventually I'm going to have to go because I'm going to start Monday tomorrow, collecting myself to take stuff to help people. Because, buddy, we got people in hard, bad ways, and it's affected my promotion. One of my wrestlers the other night had to be saved, him and his wife. They had to send fire trucks into his neighborhood to get him out before it was washed away. My cousin KC, I cannot get on the phone. I've not been able to get to him for this whole time. I finally got a hold of Joe Wheeler, my commentator, yesterday, and he said, I'm alive and I'm okay. I don't think I have a business or a job anymore because it's all underwater. And that's just two stories of thousands of people fighting this right now. And it literally is thousands of people affected.
Well, all I know is this. If you drew a line from New York City to where my apartment building is, it was about 6 miles when 9/11 took place. When that tragedy occurred, people from the South came running to help us, one after another. People from all over the United States and the world came to help us when we were in trouble. Folks, this is our turn now. If you don't live in the South, think of these people, think of the devastation, get some information. I'm going to help provide it this week. Go to your newspapers, go online, but don't sit on your thumbs. Your fellow Americans need you right now, and they need you probably worse than anything I've ever seen in a long, long time. So I don't know what else to say, but let's get together, man. There's nothing we can't do if we do it together. Is that right?
That's right. We're just, as Tojo used to say, they asked Tojo Yamamoto, why do you take those homeless people to the steakhouse and feed them? And he was mean, and he was rough, and he was tough, and he would look right at them and say, they're humans. They deserve respect too. And we're all humans, and we're all in this fight together, and some of my friends are fighting for their lives right now.
I hear you. I hear you loud and clear. So let's do it, guys. Let's get together and do everything we can to help them out. Right, John?
Oh yeah. And if you can't help with money, you could do if retweet or sharing on social media. That helps a lot too.
Yes.
Yeah, and let's all of us do something every day, a little something every day. If it can't be money every day, send some emails out, post some social media things, anything that you can do to help. Because you know what? As bad as this sounds, it's worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the best way I can put it. I saw the devastation. I can't believe my own eyes. So in any event, we had a wonderful time with these two guys. And let's all get together and help everybody out. But in the meantime, thank you guys so much. You made two wonderful shows, and I'm really glad to be your acquaintance, John. And Beau, I'm glad it was the real Beau James. That's all I got to say.
The one and only. The one and only.
The only king of sport, ladies and gentlemen, Beau James. All right, guys, thank you very much. Well, you think you're finished with the show, you're not quite finished. You know, that was the second of two podcasts we recorded together, the three of us. And I realized after the editing process that Mr. James never mentioned the name of the promotion he's involved with. What I'd like you to do is go to the website, kingofkingsport.com, and learn about Southern States Wrestling. A lot of great stars are going through there, some great young talent. I'm sure he'd love you to come out and see a show. So again, go to kingofkingsport.com and learn all about Southern States Wrestling. Both of these gentlemen were really great, weren't they? And I'm really excited about having them on my show. I think they did a wonderful job. Both of them know pro wrestling like the back of their hands, and it's just really, really cool to have them on the show. I find them, discover them, listen to their podcast, and I want to have Beau back on the show again and ask him even more questions. The more I get to know him, the more fascinating he gets. He's one of those kind of guys. Thanks, Beau. Oh, you won. Outdated Wrestling Hour.buzzsprout.com is where you can find all of our shows and all of our information. I've taken to just saying, type in on any browser, Outdated Wrestling Hour, beep, the show will come up. You'll find out where all the stations we're on. We're on everywhere. We're even on YouTube if you want to listen to it that way. And we're on all the major ones, and things are going great. And I want to thank all of you for that. And especially want to thank the Outdated Wrestling Hour fan club members. By the time this show hits the airwaves, I should have scheduled a fan club meeting, a Zoom-style meeting that we do periodically. And you never know who's going to show up for those things. So I'm really looking forward to the next one. What else can I tell you to do? Write to us if you want to talk about just regular wrestling. Write to me at outdatedwrestling@gmail.com. You can find me at Facebook. I'm the man singing with BB King right there. A little younger, a little more handsome back then, but it's still me. What else? What else is on? Don't miss the Outdated Entertainment Hour. It's our sister podcast. Make sure you listen to everything on the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. You never know what you'll like and find there. It's an amazing array of wrestling podcast shows. Nothing else like it. So anyway, that's our podcast for this time. We will be back next week with something new. This was recorded several weeks before we got around to it because we wanted to schedule in the coverage of the International Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, obviously. We want to do that the week that the Hall of Fame ceremony came out. So we put this one back for a week, but better late than never, because this is one of the more fun shows I've done recently. And again, thanks to both of these fine gentlemen. I hope to have them back again soon. I hope to have you back soon on the Outdated Wrestling Hour podcast. My name is Bob Smith. I'm an old wrestling magazine guy and getting older by the minute. Oh, man. And as Ringo Starr used to say, peace and love, brothers and sisters, peace and love.